In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create this sort of dashboard type system here. Dependent drop-downs where you've got incredibly long lists of items. I'm using products and product categories here, where you can't feasibly create separate drop-down dependent lists for every single item that someone could pick. We're going to do the whole thing. It's completely dynamic. It's all working off of this one sheet. And guess what? Only one line of VBA code. I actually recorded and edited that. So we're going to go through this from scratch. I'm going to start with a blank sheet of paper and recreate something that looks pretty much exactly like this from scratch and go through it formula by formula, every single click, etc. It's all going to happen. If all you want is an overview of the method first, I've got another video. Send the description, plus there's a bit of a link. There should be a link on screen or something, so you can just click on that. So let's start from the very, very beginning. Okay, right, I've created a completely blank sheet example. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my first list from the example page. Let's do that there. So this is your first list that you want on the drop down. It's completely fixed. If you need to make that dynamic, then use some of the techniques that we talk about in some of my other videos, or you'll see the second list is dynamic, so you could apply that kind of technique to this first list as well. We're going to use a fixed first list. So this is our product subcategory. Now, our second list is going to be our list of products, and it's going to depend on the subcategory that we picked. Now, you can see there's 17 items in this list. Now, I've got another video that shows pretty much how you can do this when you've got a very short list, and that involves basically creating a separate product list for every single one of these items, and then using some kind of offset technique to like move to sort of list 17. 17 might just be achievable, but what if you had kind of 100? Do you really want to be creating 100 separate lists? It's just going to take a load of time. As you know, the whole reason I'm here is I want to save people time, really. Well, it's not the only reason, but that is one of the main goals of my channel, save you time. I think there's tons of time gets wasted in Excel, generally speaking. 17 separate lists, we're not going there. We're going to create 1 second dynamic list that's just going to change depending on what item has been picked from that first list, and then link that second one to our drop down. So let's set up our drop down first. Now I'm going to leave a bit of space and I'm just going to see where we started. Right, column H. So if we just, I'm going to copy from here just to keep things simple. Right, so column H. Right, so we want our product subcategory. So just copy and paste again from there. Now, I'm going to use form controls. So form controls you get from the developer tab. There's several types of drop-down lists, but form controls are great for what we're doing here because what they effectively do is they're nice and simple. They're a good compromise between an ActiveX control, which is sort of super duper, you know, all singing, all dancing, but quite a bit of heavy setup involved, or a data validation list, which is kind of like might sort of work, but doesn't quite look as professional. It's not quite so obvious that it's a drop-down list. So good compromise is use an old form control. So we need to make it a bit wider. I mean, in essence, we want it roughly the same width as that. So that's 212. So we could also make it 212, but I'm going to make it about 220 because we've got the sort of drop-down arrow on the end. So insert form control. We want this form control combo box. Holding down Alt there. So it means we can line everything up to the corners. Right click, format the control, straight to the input range. Our input range is this list, nice and simple. Cell link, which is going to be there. This is going to tell us which item has been picked. Okay, so I'm just going to call that item chosen. 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 Right, don't be a perfectionist here. Right, so when I click on that, computers and peripherals, item number 5. I'm going to left align this, and I'm going to make this grey just so that it's slightly lighter. I'm going to say this is the now item text. Terrible with a shift key. Right. So I want this to say computer peripherals. Peripherals, sorry. Peripheral. Or envelopes, for example. I don't want it to say number 7. Given that it's a fixed list, we could do something really simple, which would be to pick an offset. So I could do, for example, offset from there, number of rows, 7. Sorry, too few arguments, so no columns, let's say envelope. That'll work. Okay, well, I want to show you what I did in the main example, because in the main example here, I've used an index match formula, and I want you to be able to understand that. And it's a bit more flexible because if new items start coming into the list, etc., we can handle them without changing the formulas potentially. In fact, I'm going to show you something even better. Still an index match, but it's even better than what I put in that in the actual spreadsheet that you're downloading. I'm going to use an index match, but I'm going to use full column ranges. So an index is basically going to allow you to pick a row or a column or both from a range of data. So what's our range of data? Well, this is what I mean by full column ranges. I'm going to click on the column header and I say I want to pick something from column C. All right. And what row number do I want to pick? Well, it's it's not number 12 because it's actually, we picked pens and art supplies. It's number 16. So we need to pick the 16th item. How are we going to do that? We're going to find the row on which number 12 sits. And the way we do that is use a match formula. So I pick match. What are we looking at? We're looking at number 12. That's what we want, right? Fix that. Where are we looking for it? We're looking for it in the whole of column B. Fix that. Are we trying to match it exactly? Yes, of course we are. Do you know, I count on one hand the amount of times I've used any other type of match on a match, but anyway. Right, exact matches. We don't need to worry about the column number, it's an optional thing. We're picking the same. We've already said we're looking in column C, so there's only one column anyway. Close that, pens and art supplies comes up. Right, so we got this, right. So this is what we're going to use now in our pivot table. Next, we want the pivot table. So data. We're going to make the pivot table from our main data table. And I've already made this into an actual table, right? And the way I did that was as long as all your data is together, so it's, you know, there's no gap, no blank rows or blank columns or anything, you can literally click anywhere in it and click Control T. Now, giving me an error because it's already done it. And that will allow you to create it as a table. And the advantage of that is that anyone starts putting extra data on the bottom, you can see it sort of adds another row. See, it adds these rows. I'm just going to click Control Z to undo all of that. And that means that your pivot table, if it's linked to a table, will automatically expand and cope with new data coming in. So again, another great flexibility tip that I've now use all the time, to be honest. So I'm going to click anywhere in this table and insert pivot table. And I'm going to put it on my existing worksheet, just so I can, to be honest, I would always advise putting pivot tables on separate worksheets, but I'm just trying to keep it on one sheet for the purposes of this example. So I'm going to put it here. Actually, I'm just going to put it here because I'm going to put filters on top, and annoyingly with pivot tables, they whack the filters kind of 2 rows above. So I'm going to say that, click OK. So let's have our choices here. So it's pretty small. Right, so we want our product subcategory as our filter. because we're going to link it to whatever was picked here. So when this says Pen Art Supplies, we want this to say Pen Art Supplies. And then we want it to generate a list of products that relate to that. So for example, let's just pick appliances on both. So when that says appliances, this here will be our list that we want the second drop down to populate. So a couple of things we need to do on this pivot table. Right, firstly, I'm going to move the whole thing down 2 rows. Right, so I can do Control Shift plus, shift cells down. That allows me to put up there list 2. But more importantly, we need an item count. Now, we're going to put this item count. Now, we can't use a count, sorry, we need to use count A because we're counting text items. We need to count how many items are in this list. So we're going to start there, and if I hold down Control Shift, now we don't just want to go to the bottom of there, I want to hit it again, the down arrow again. So we've got every row on the spreadsheet. Hit F4, hit enter, 73. Now, slight issue, the word grand total is at the bottom. We don't want that, so we just go to the design of our pivot table, grand totals, and we can just switch them all off for now. You see that number's now gone down to 72. If you want it to look exactly like mine, I think I picked something like that, I think. I'm going to close that. Incidentally, if you want to get that back, you can just use this button here. So now we just need to link those 2 lists together. Right, how do we do this? Right, assign a macro. Example drop down change, that will do. Yes, I'm going to record it. Okay, right. So my recorded macro is me clicking, say, envelopes. Okay. Right. Go to developer, stop recording. Right, Alt F11 will take me in here. Put it in here. Now, let's just delete that macro one. That was me messing about earlier. This is the one we've just recorded. So let's have a look at it. Right. What's it doing? So it's saying, take the pivot table 2, take the field product subcategory, clear all the filters. Take the same pivot table, same field, and set it to envelopes. So if we edit this code, so instead of it saying envelopes, we can make it equal whatever that cell says. We're good to go, yeah? So the way that I like to do this, right, is I give this a named range and refer to it in a named range, because the problem, I could say, oh, it equals cell I6 because it's I6, right? So I could literally go in here and say something like, oh, equals a range, I6, and I have to put dot value, okay? That'll do the job until somebody moves this cell, and then, or you insert a column or something, and it'll all go hellwire, right? So no, don't do that. Click on that cell, go up here. I can hide this list now, make it. So click on that cell, go up here, and just give it a name. I'm going to call this prod subcat, and then you got to hit the enter key. Don't click out of it because it won't record it. Hit the enter key, and you can tell when you click in, it should reappear as that. Take that, copy it, Control C, go back to your VB editor, and then instead of that range there, put that in, right? So now, even if this gets moved, it's still got the same name and your macro is still going to work, right? So people start inserting columns, you can cut and paste this wherever you want now, still going to work. Right, is it going to work? So, yes, look. So it's simple. Now I did promise you one line of code and you go, hold on, there's two. Reason there's two, actually this line of code here, clear filters, is completely superfluous. You do not need to clear the filters because you're picking a new filter each time anyway, so there's no reason to clear them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all of that, and it still looks like two lines, but if we do that, look at that. One line, as promised, one line of code, right? Okay, just check it still works. Yeah, rubber bands, right. Now this is jumping around like I don't know what, isn't it, right? Little bit annoying. One of my pet hates with pivot tables, auto resizing. Kind of, I guess they're kind of useful, but I just switch it off, right? So go to your options on pivot tables, first page, layout format, auto fit column widths. Don't want that, right? So now we've got kind of a fixed column width, and yeah, things are sticking out and over and all of that. But it doesn't really matter. We're going to hide all of that in a minute anyway, so you won't see things sticking out. Yeah. Okay, so now we need a new drop-down list, and we need it based off of what's in here. So how are we going to choose this? We're going to put in a new one then. So another form control. So form control, combo box. I'm going to just make, we're going to need something way wider, aren't we? Probably something more like out here at least. So we're going to say product. And we're still going to need an item chosen. That's just copied that. So you can just simply delete that, it's fine. We're going to need to format this control. So the cell link we know is that. But what's the input range? Well, it's this pivot table, yeah? But you don't know how many rows this pivot table is going to have, which is why we've got this row count here. So we need an input range, and we need a formula in here. So we're going to link it to a named range. So we're going to have a dynamic named range on this that lists everything on that pivot table, 193 rows. Now, as dynamic name ranges go, it's actually a relatively straightforward one because the column is fixed and we're just expanding the number of rows based on the item count of the pivot table. So it's relatively straightforward. So we'll just okay that for the moment. Let's set up our named range. So name manager, we're going to give it a new name range. I'm going to call this another one, N product list. Hopefully I've not already done this one. And it's going to be an offset formula because offset returns a range of cells and based on a criteria, sort of starting point and size of the range. So our starting point will be here. Now, you might say, well, why not pick there? Now, the problem with picking there is it's not so bad with a pivot table, actually. It'd probably be fine, in fact, with a pivot table. But as a just general best practice, picking a header row as your start point for a dynamic range is a better idea because header rows, if people start inserting rows at row 1, then the header row hasn't moved. Whereas if you started your list at the first item in the list and somebody decides to put one in front of that, or they resort it or something like that, you can end up with your start position moving and causing errors. So pick your header row as your starting point, and then your offset, your start offset is always going to be 1. In other words, you're going to move down 1 row from your header row before you start creating your list. And you're not going to move any columns, so this is going to be a 0 for the number of columns. How long is your list? It's that cell there, and that's fixed, and it automatically fixes it, so it's going to be 193. That's obviously an item count, so it's always going to change as the list change. How wide is your list? It's going to be 1 column wide, and we're clicking OK. Right, so that's end product list. So I'm going to close that, and then what we're going to do is we're going to make that say end product list. So now this list is basically what's in that pivot table. You can see it is, yeah? And this list changes the pivot table, therefore changes what's in this list. And it's always exactly the right length. So that's got 87 rows in it. I mean, you can't count them, but trust me, it's got 87. I'll pick the bottom one, XLAT. You can see, we go to the bottom. There you go, XRAC file for hanging folders. So there we go. Right, so next we need to bring up the item text. Now, we used an index plus row in the original, you'll see. If I just go to that, you can see using a formula index plus a start row. So I'll use that, but actually, I'll use that in a minute. But actually, you could do this very simply in this particular case, because you can just use an offset from that start header row on the pivot table by the number that's been chosen, and obviously no columns. And that will always give you the right answer because this is being driven from a pivot table. So that would be a very simple way, but I'm going to show you how to do the index row thing because it's just it's useful if you're not running from pivot tables. So right, so index, we've used it before, but just again, pick our array, what we, in other words, our range of information, and then what row number we're looking for. So again, whole column, right? Fix it. What row do we want? Well, we want the item we've chosen, which is the 66 item, but we then need to add on the row of the, so hold on, just fix that. Add on the row of the header column because it might be the 66th item in the list, but the list doesn't start until row 9. So we need to add on 8 to the number. Good way of doing that is to just pick the row function, the row of the header row. That's fixed as well. Close the brackets. There we go. Right. Same result. It just gives you an added string to your bow. Right. So we're going to just grey that out. There. So now all that remains to be done is basically put in our output data. So I'm going to close this up just to keep it simpler. So we'll do that. Use shortcut key, Alt, Shift and arrow to the right to group that. Incidentally, you can expand and collapse with shortcut keys, because if you use Alt A and then you've got like group and ungroup and hide and show detail sort of up here, you can see that J or H. So J would, for example, expand that, and Alt A H would hide it. So I'm going to copy just the format of this for the moment. That should probably give me some kind of error, I'd imagine. I know. And I'm going to delete those formulas because we're going to do it from the start. I want to base this on customer segment, which is something in this data table on here, but we could have said, for example, to pick province or shipping mode or any of the other information in this data table. It doesn't matter. The key thing is that it needs to be in the same data table as the item that's being picked. So our sales then, we're going to use some ifs. Right. The sum range. So we go to our data. Now you can include the header like that. And that gives you a slightly longer formula, but I'm just going to do this nice and simple at sales. Right, criteria range 1. Let's do the product first. So I'm using all these arrow key shortcuts. Basically, Control jumps around with the arrow keys, and Control Shift allows you to highlight while you're jumping. So that's the product name. So what is the product name that we're looking at? Well, we want that one. Now it's put the sheet name in front of it. I'm just going to hit F4 because it's fixed. I don't like the sheet name in front. typically. I think I've left it on the download version, but personal preference just makes the formula longer, and it just means that when you copy and paste it to a different sheet, it doesn't work. So that's our first thing. So we've got all the sales. So that's going to give us, if we just stop there, give us all the sales for that product. We want it based on the customer segment small business. So we need to say that we want to pick the customer segment. So I've done that. And back to here, what customer segment? That one. That is going to vary. The row is going to change as the formula is copied. So I'm just going to fix the column. And then again, I'm going to get rid of sheet name. So you can see we're doing a sum if. We're looking for the product and customer segment combination sales. Okay, and I can copy that down there. Control D. Right. Now, I can copy that formula over to there. And this is one advantage of tables for sure. I can just change that word sales for profit, and it gives me a drop down list there. Hit tab to select it, hit enter, Control D there, and there we go. There's our sales and profit. Is it working? Well, let's pick a different product. Yeah. Highlight that, Alt F1, instant chart. Hold the actual Alt key as you move it around, it will click onto the cells. So I'm just going to do something like that. Pretty awful looking chart, doesn't matter because on our chart design here, that looks pretty good. I mean, pick your own, but I'll stick with that one like I used in the example. Chart type, column chart, first one looking good. Colors, no, that's there. Palette 4 in this case. Add some data labels. Got there, data labels. Yeah. Oh dear, we're in a bit of a mess now. Right. So let's get rid of that anyway. We've got our axes sort of overlapping everything. On our axis, in fact, I'm going to move that up here somewhere for the moment, out of the way. So our actual axes, we can get clicked on that. Yeah, clicked on that. Right click, format axes. What we want is we want the labels, instead of next to the axes, we want it low, because we're going to deal with negative numbers. It's a bit annoying sometimes to have them when you've got stuff next to the axes, doesn't really work. And then we're also going to move that down, take up a bit more room because we can. And now we can tidy up the title. So click on the title there, hit the equals sign and click there, so that will pick up that title. I can drag it over there. Some of our products have got very long names indeed, so I'm going to drag that under there like that. Maybe we want this a bit bigger actually. Right, that looks pretty good. And then let's pick a really long one. Oh yeah, I reckon I changed my mind. Let's put that over there. And in actual fact, we could just do something like this. And we can expand the font sizes a bit. And that's kind of looking pretty good, apart from the fact I've just picked something that's got virtually no data, but other than that, looking pretty good. Right, so final sort of tarting up, if you like. Hide these rows, Control 9, or hide things, Control 9, Control Shift 9 unhide, but Control 9 hide it. So now I think we've got a pretty tidy looking dashboard feature. So we can pick on any product we want and look at the profit and the sales figures by customer segment. So one more final feature is turn off these grid lines and get it looking a bit nicer. So where are we? View, grid lines, they've gone. Yeah, and tidy it up, give it your own themes and colors, things like that. Put your own lists in it. It's all ready to go. If you want another overview or a refresher, I've got an overview video that goes through this, goes through the basic techniques, doesn't start from scratch like this video. Should be a link in the description or maybe even on your screen right now. Click that download link, it's straight to your computer, no details required, nothing like that. All for you to use, distribute, do what you like with. Keep learning with Up for Excel, and I'll see you soon.